Just want to take a few moments to thank everyone for coming tonight. If you can't hear me, let me know. I'm going to try to project my voice, or turning it on as well. Just want to do a couple of quick introductions. My name is Jay Lang. I'm the superintendent here in Chelmsford. And we have some of our central office staff with us today. Dr. Linda Hirsch, who's our assistant superintendent, is with us. Jenny Omeg, who is our communications director, and Jenny is going to be instrumental in helping us really provide information to the public as we look and go through this project. Brian Curley is our director of facilities and operations. Brian is with us here today. And I always have to give a special thanks to Tom Peterson and Pete Padula, who's behind the scenes helping us with this recording, because we wanted to be able to provide an in-person session to talk a little bit about the project, what we're going to be considering over the coming months and years. And we wanted to be able to record it, just in case individuals couldn't come tonight to watch it. We'll put a copy of the recording up on our district website. We'll be able to push that out so that people can see that in time to come. We also have our school committee members here with us this evening, so we'll just take a minute to recognize them. Our chair, Donna Newcomb, Dennis King, Maria Santos, Susan McKinnon. Very special thanks also. Donna is going to be leaving the committee, but we really want to thank you again for your support. We know you're still going to be involved in this project and helping us in schools in Chelmsford, but it's been great working with Donna for the last 6 years, and just again appreciate everything you've done as you transition off the committee. So, no time for speech. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what you may have heard about, potential school building project here in Chelmsford. So for the last number of months and years, we've been doing some work behind the scenes to potentially do a new school building project here in town. So what we're going to try to do today is provide as much information as we possibly can about kind of how we got to where we are, what the different possibilities that we're considering are, and then as we work with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or I may say the MSBA during the presentation, how they actually work with us, what their role would be, and how we're going to look at these different options. We had applied, and I'm going to give a little bit of that background in a few minutes, to the Mass School Building Authority for their participation and for their partnership in this potential project, because the Mass School Building Authority is an agency in the state that will work with towns and school districts on either school renovations or new school buildings, and they participate financially in that process. And for Chelmsford, because of a formula and a number of different factors, approximately half of the project cost would be funded by the state, and then the town would be responsible for the other half of the project. Certain communities, it's a different percentage based on a community's ability to pay and wealth and things like that. But ballpark Chelmsford percentage is right around 50%. So you'll see that in a lot of my documents. Town Manager Cohen and I actually had kind of a kickoff meeting today with the MSBA, and we found that during this phase of the process between now and December, our actual percentage participation rate is 52.26%. So that would be the actual reimbursement rate. In my presentation, it still says approximately 50% because I've been actually doing this for a little bit, and we didn't know exactly what the percentage rate was going to be until today, and I didn't go in and change the slides. But approximately half of the cost would be borne by the state, and then the town would be responsible for the other half. We ended up applying, going through a very long process, and in the end, we're given the opportunity to look at 3 different scenarios as far as a potential new building project in town. The first scenario would be just a one-for-one replacement of Parker Middle School. And a little bit later in the discussion, we'll get into why Parker Middle School was the school that was selected. But Parker Middle School currently houses all students in the district in grades 5 and 6. We did a realignment in the district, and we implemented this past September. So all of our middle school kids go to the same school, Parker, and then they go off to McCarthy for grades 7 and 8 before they go to the high school for grades 9 to 12. So the first option would just be that one-for-one replacement of Parker Middle School. Parker Middle School currently has approximately 800 students in it. So as a ballpark number, that would be about an 800 student school. A second option would be, because one of the factors that we're going to talk about also tonight and in the coming months and years, we do have an enrollment increase. There's a trend of an enrollment increase coming to the schools. So we know over the next 5 to 10 years, and we've just done a new projection on that, over 600 students will be added to our population in the elementary, middle, and high school grade levels. obviously at different times based on the age of the child and how they progress up through the school system. But adding another 600 students to our school district is significant. And we wanted to be able to, again, kind of right-size this building, or if we're going to build a new project, make sure it can accomplish and take care of the student population we not only currently have, but also the student population we're going to be receiving in the coming years. To do that within our existing schools that we have, our existing 7-school configuration, we're coming up short in capacity at our elementary and middle schools. So one possibility would be the second one, which would be a discussion around option 2. Do you potentially build a brand new middle school for the entire town in grades 5 to 8? So that would be a very large middle school. That would be about double what we have now. So that would be about a 1,600 student middle school. What that would allow is McCarthy Middle School to basically become a swing space or a swing school, potentially be converted to a 5th elementary school. So we would then have capacity for the elementary and obviously the middle school going into the new building. So that's also another option we're going to look at. Again, that's a very significant size option. The third option that we were allowed to take a look at is what they call a grade realignment or grade reconfiguration. So when we did the alignment of our middle schools for this year, Parker is grades 5 and 6. But we wanted to take a look at, we're having the enrollment increases kind of hitting us first at the elementary level before it comes up to middle school. So could we potentially take the 4th grade out of our current elementary school buildings and build a new 3-grade level school, a new grade 4, 5, and 6 school? That would then open up capacity of between 100 and 125 students at the elementary level at each school. That would free up 4 to 5 classrooms in the current buildings to be able to handle the enrollment increase at the elementary level. As well as grades 4, 5, and 6 are very developmentally and age appropriate as far as our curriculum and peer groups and things like that within schools go. So it would be a nice transition then up to McCarthy, which would remain a 7 and 8, a 2-grade level school, and then off to the high school. So ballpark, that would be about a 1,200 student school if you're thinking about 400 students per grade. So we have the smallest would just be the 1-for-1 replacement. Kind of the mid-range step would be the realignment with the grades 4, 5, and 6. And the largest would end up being a brand new grade 5 to 8 school for the entire town, that the entire town would go to. As we went through this process, and what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, we really wanted to try to accomplish as much as we could with one project for the town. We could have taken a look at doing multiple elementary schools in a row, or potentially a couple of different middle schools. But we do have the need now for additional enrollment capacity within our buildings. And we also wanted to do something that was going to be cost effective. We didn't want to keep coming back to the town every 4 or 5 years saying, now we need to do school 2, and now we need to do school 3. It also creates some inequity within the town based on when a new school would come on board. Would your kids be able to benefit from the new school? Would another part of the community not? So we don't want to create a situation where we kind of have a have and have not type thing happening in town. So we wanted to see what could we possibly do to, if we were going to do a new building project, in one project accomplish the very most for the district. And that's what these 3 options I think really allow us to do. And when it came to the middle school project, we'll talk a little bit about this in a minute as well. I'm going to get into why we kind of moved away from the high school project, which was talked about some years ago, because I have received some questions about that and how we kind of got to the middle school. We weren't getting traction on our high school application, and again, I'll kind of get into that. And we shifted to take a look at the 2 middle schools. And we could make, as a town, a much more compelling argument for a new Parker Middle School over McCarthy Middle School because of capacity, which you'll see within the enrollment projections, as well as conditions of the building. Parker just poses many more short and long-term issues as far as accommodations, layout of space. If you were to do some type of a renovation to that building, much more costly than McCarthy would. So we felt, again, we didn't want to keep going through a process with the state and every year you apply and you get turned down, you have to start all over again the following year. Of the two middle schools, we really felt that we could make the more compelling argument, and that's why we ended up going with Parker. We'll take a second and just kind of take a look at this slide. This just in more of a graphic kind of displays what I talked about, where option 1 is the new grade 5-6 middle school, the one-on-one replacement. McCarthy remains 7-8, and then your 4 elementary schools remain K-4 schools. Second option is kind of that mega middle school, brand new 5-8, and then McCarthy becomes the 5th school, or kind of a swing school to be able to help with those enrollments at the elementary level. And then the third option, again, is that realignment that brings the 4th grade up into the new potential building with 5-6, and then McCarthy stays 7-8, and then you maintain your 4 elementary schools. So these are the 3 options that we're really going to get a little more in depth about. People have asked, why are we considering this at this point? And a lot of it really does come down to our current enrollment at the elementary and middle school levels are at capacity, and as we'll show you in the slides that follow, we know there are additional kids coming to the district. Chelmsford is a very desirable community to live in. It's a desirable community to have your kids be educated in, and there are more and more coming, and as the projections will indicate, approximately 600 or so kids over the next 10 years is what the projection is. We just had NESDEC, which is short for the New England School Development Council, come and do a demographic study for us. They had done one in 2016, a very deep kind of enrollment projection. They take a look at birth rates in the community. They take a look at housing developments in the community that are in permitted, or in process, in potential pipeline. They help you do the projection of exactly how many students you should be planning your school system for. Every year they update their enrollment projection based on our October 1st counts. That's a pretty significant count school districts have that they turn over to the state, because that's what our Chapter 70 formula is predicated on. So every year they do an update. They take a snapshot of what they projected and then what actually happened. And that's helpful for us when we're planning budgeting for a coming year. But we knew we were going to be having this discussion with the MSBA, and the MSBA has their own way that they do enrollment projections. We wanted to make sure that we had some good data, because there are a lot of communities in the state that are not seeing an enrollment increase. They're actually seeing a decline. So we're a little bit of an outlier on that front. But we want to make sure that we have kind of the ammunition, we have the backup when we're talking to the MSBA about the potential project, why we should build to the scale and size that we think we need to not only help us in the immediate future, but again, help us over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years as these buildings have a significant lifespan. We get into it a little bit deeper, but Parker, just in the short and long term, really does present some functional problems for us that would be very significant to fill. And I think we really need to, again, have a new school building in town that is more aligned with some of the functionality that we need for our schools. The 4th bullet talks a little bit, again, I mentioned kind of not creating that have and have not situation. We were very careful when we were doing this planning to try to have a project that all kids in the town could benefit from. So again, if we were to build a new middle school and we said, you know what, we're going to build a new Parker Middle School as is, grades 5 to 8, McCarthy Middle School, would be impacted. They wouldn't have that same experience. If we did McCarthy and not Parker, it'd be the same. As a district, we did also take a look at some of the inequity in the programming in the buildings, and whether we were going to go forward with this project or not, we said we really think it makes sense to have the kids have that same experience. And this last year we realigned the middle schools. So now everyone in grades 5, 6 goes to Parker. Everyone in 7, 8 has that same experience at McCarthy before they then move off to the high school. By doing that, any of the 3 options that we have are going to benefit the whole town at the same time. So if it were just option 1, the McCarthy 5, 6, all of our kids are going there. If it is option 2, 5 to 8, they'd all be going there. If it is option 3, 4, 5, 6, all those kids would be going to that school. So every single student that lives in this town that are in those grade levels are going to benefit from either one of these options. We also know at the end of this, we're going to need to come to the town for assistance and help to fund this project. I think it is much more likely that we'll receive a positive feedback and a positive vote if it's a project the entire town is benefiting from, as opposed to 1 out of our 4 elementary schools, or 25% of the town, and the other 75% aren't. Or the other 75% have to wait a number of years until it's their turn for their project. So when we looked at this, we really wanted to make sure that the entire town was going to benefit at the same time. And as with everything in the economy these days, construction and school construction is expensive. It would be a very expensive project for the town to try to accomplish on their own. The MSBA and being able to partner with them and have about 50% of the cost, and again, today we learned it would be 52.26% of the cost be borne by the state, I think is really significant for the town. It really allows the town to leverage their funding to get an excellent new building for this community, doing it in a cost-effective and cost-wise way. So that's why we were considering this particular project. Now, a couple of years ago, and I have received some questions about this, we had submitted an application for a high school project. And back in 2015-16, we had a firm come in with us and actually look at the current status of our buildings. We wanted to do some short and long-term capital planning. We again kind of had the same conditions where we wanted to have one project that could potentially benefit all. We started to take a look at what could we do in town to have that happen. Again, trying to be cost effective, trying to be timely, and a lot of our districts and towns and cities that are near us are building new state-of-the-art high schools. So we said, if we actually were to build a new Chelmsford High School, all of the kids in the town would benefit from that. Chelmsford High School current is technically the newest school building in town. We both celebrated our 50th birthdays a year ago. So if you think about it though, for the newest building in town to be 50 years old is pretty significant. But it is a 50-year-old building. It is incredibly well maintained. That hurt us application-wise, which we'll get into. But the thought process was brand new high school, consolidate our two middle schools into the old high school, which again would be a new school for them. It'd be a new school in town. Then Parker could come offline. McCarthy could potentially be a fifth elementary school if we needed it to, and that could take care of our needs. So we applied 4 years in a row for that under that thought process. And when you apply for a project with the MSBA, it's a clean slate every year. So you apply and you're evaluated against every other project that applies that particular year. A high school project is obviously the most expensive project, more expensive than a middle, more expensive than an elementary school. And the state can only fund so many high school projects in a given year. The high school projects that we find ourselves up against are significantly older, are in significantly worse shape than Chelmsford High School. And the feedback we got from the state after a couple of years was, you certainly can keep applying for a new high school project, and we see merit in your application. We do not find fault with your application at all. From a competitive nature though, you're just not competing against the other high schools that are being funded that are 100+ years old, that have serious structural lack of maintenance type issues. We just couldn't make that argument with Chelmsford High School. So back in 2020, as COVID was kind of beginning, 2020 right through 2021, we had the group come back in and we had some real honest conversations among the school committee and the staff in the district around, we can again continue to apply for a high school project, and it could be 6 years, 10 years. We don't know how long it's going to take to get a building, but we just know that our application is not going to be that competitive. Or is there another option that we could explore that we would have a more likely chance of being approved that could again, in one project, accomplish the things that we really wanted to accomplish? So we switched back in 2022 and we applied for the first time for Parker. And when that process was evaluated, we were right on the bubble. We were the bubble project when they were doing their ratings. At one point we were in, at one point we were out. And because of funding, there were also a lot of other communities in the area that had gone out to bid kind of post-COVID or in the middle of COVID. Construction costs were coming in much higher than they were. And the state ended up backing off a couple of projects to not overcommit their funding in case they had to go back and help some of those other communities that they'd already agreed to work with that were coming in when their bids went out, coming in higher than anticipated, and we didn't make the cut that year. We applied again last year, and right around the holidays this year, we got the call from the MSBA that we were invited in, that our application for Parker Middle School was accepted, and that we were invited into what they call the eligibility period. So we were really excited about that. That's your foot getting in the door with the MSBA for this potential partnership and potential for a new school building project. In the end, I think this project is still going to serve us incredibly well. It maintains all of those things that we were looking for as far as one project, taking care of multi-grade levels and really setting us up for the long run. In the end as well, a middle school project is obviously a little less expensive than a high school project. So I think that's something that hopefully the town will see and again want to work with us on. But I did want to put that out there about the high school because there are still some conversations I have with folks and they'll say, well, I thought we were going for high school. And we certainly did. And we looked at that for 4 years, but we ultimately made the decision to step back and to explore and move forward with the middle school project. So I just want to make sure that that was out there. I mentioned the high school being our newest building in town at 50 years old. And obviously, if that's the newest, all of our other buildings are slightly older. And they range from 50 years being the newest all the way to technically Center being the oldest, although Center had a very significant renovation not too long ago. But our building stock for schools is old. We do need to start investing in schools and school buildings and turning over some of these buildings into more modern spaces. The town, in my time here, has always done a very good job of maintaining the spaces. Our building custodians do a super job with the cleaning and the day-to-day upkeep of the spaces. The Chelmsford DPW does a very nice job with contractors and the DPW staff and the different tradespeople of maintaining the buildings. Again, that was one of the things that actually hurt us in our application, ironically, for the high school because the buildings are maintained so well. So we have very structurally sound, solid buildings that we're educating our kids in. They're aging. And we do need to start to turn that over a little bit and potentially get a new school in town. And again, I think this one project really makes a lot of sense and accomplishes a lot of what we're talking about. Now, I mentioned back in 2015 is when we had that group come in and work with us. After they worked with us, that's when we did come up with the multiple options for the high school. One of the recommendations at the time back in 2017, because again, we had a pressing need, particularly at that time at the elementary school level. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to implement full-day kindergarten, and we didn't physically have the space in the buildings to do that. We were one of the only communities in Massachusetts that didn't have full-day kindergarten at the time. So that was really important to us to do. Secondly, we did have what we call bubble classrooms or overcrowding in some of our schools. We zone kids to go to schools by the neighborhood that they live in. So Byam, as an example, is probably at this point in time our most subscribed elementary school. Our elementary schools were all built with the notion of having what we call a 4-strand per grade level configuration. So you would have 4 kindergarten classrooms, you would have 4 first grades, 4 second, 4 third, 4 fourths right up the way. What we have is called bubble classes, or based on enrollment, again, because students go by geography to their schools. If we have too many students that we exceed our recommended guidelines for number of pupils per grade, we add a class. So we have a 5th section of a particular class. And every once in a while, you'll have a 5th section in a particular school, just based on age of kids and where they live. But at this point in time, 4 out of the 5 grade levels at Byam have the bubble class. They have 5. Next year, they're very likely going to have 5 sections across the board. We absolutely needed to build the modular classroom buildings that we did back in 2017, but that is still 7 years ago at this point. We've been kind of surviving on adding modular buildings. We have a significant cluster of modular buildings, kind of the old school modular buildings at Parker. We have a few here at McCarthy. But longer term, we definitely need to turn those into more permanent spaces. And that's something that we seek to do. Again, in 21 is when we had that group come back and work with us a little bit to refine our options. This slide is one that we'd actually used previously because when we do submit our application to the MSBA and we're trying to work with them and we're trying to make an argument with them about why they should partner with us, the MSBA does not look at any of your modular spaces. They don't consider that when they look at like gross square footage and how big a building is, how many students can be serviced there. So when you look at the MSBA chart and we look at our 4 elementary schools right across the top, all of them are technically over capacity. McCarthy and the high school are the only 2 that you'll notice are technically under capacity. So on that issue of trying to make a compelling argument for one of the 2 middle schools, capacity is something the MSBA looks at, and if you're over capacity or not. So that was one of the key triggers for us when we were deciding over Parker McCarthy. It certainly had to do with building conditions, but another key element was we could not have made an argument about McCarthy being oversubscribed or over capacity based on MSBA standards, but Parker certainly was. This chart I find helpful because for our practical purposes in town, we do consider and we do use those modular classrooms. So I don't want people watching to think that, you know, we're over capacity and you know, we just have too many children in classrooms, because we do use the modular classrooms, particularly the 22 classrooms that we added at the elementary level. Again, are not your run-of-the-mill, kind of what you think about as an old school modular classroom. They're actually modular buildings. They're built on a foundation. They have bathrooms, they have AC, you know, they have full amenities. They're really beautiful spaces, and the kids and teachers that we have very much enjoy being educated and working in them. So they're good spaces. This chart kind of helps to show, again, from an MSBA standpoint, this is our current enrollment in the fall on the far left. Using the MSBA's square footage guidelines, it tells you how many students you should be educating in a building. So the 3rd column is without the modules, because that was one of the conditions we had to look at when we were filing our application. But the 5th column that says capacity with modules, you'll see that we're basically at capacity. It's not that we're significantly over capacity, because we do take those modular classrooms into consideration. We don't have a lot of room to add, but we did have some. And then certainly at McCarthy, again, either way, with or without, we have additional capacity within that particular building. Parker's over capacity, and the high school doesn't have any modular classrooms. And the high school has capacity, so we don't have an issue right now with the high school. But I thought this slide was telling, and it helped kind of show exactly how we were able to make some of that argument with MSBA for the project that we selected. We ultimately, back in '22, went through this project with the architectural group that we had hired, because we needed to see if we were going to shift off the high school project into the middle school project. So we basically did decide back in the winter of '22 to shift from a high school to a middle school project. We then had to talk about what elements and grade level configurations, enrollments we wanted to look at, and we had done a lot of the visioning ahead of time, so we had data on that from even when we did the high school project. So we were able to get some quick data and look at that again, and ultimately did submit that statement of interest, the first one in '22, which was unsuccessful, and then the second one in '23, which was successful. So that's how we got to kind of where we are today. This again, I think, just kind of goes to the need as to, you know, as a district, why did we pick Parker as opposed to McCarthy as the school to apply for? Again, the capacity slides kind of show the need space-wise, and we have capacity at McCarthy. But there are a few major things that if we wanted to just renovate or try to turn Parker into a better space for the long term, that are going to hamper us and actually be very costly. The first is the modular classrooms that are in the building. So we do have a significant number of modular classrooms at that particular building that are kind of the older school modular classrooms that are coming up for needing to be replaced. Again, the town has done an excellent job of maintaining them, but they only have such a life expectancy, and they would have to be replaced. One of the things that we ran into at the elementary schools when we were adding the modular buildings there is Center Elementary School was the only building that could actually take the modular classrooms and attach them to the space, because it was up to code and didn't have any existing triggers that were going to trip code. The big issue we had at the other schools is on fire systems. We don't have sprinkler systems in any of our elementary schools. So if we were to remove, and I see the fireman nodding at me, if we were to remove the modular classrooms and actually put new ones in, we couldn't attach them to the building without then triggering all of these different code issues we'd have to do. We'd have to bring the building up sprinkler-wise to be able to do that. That's why at the elementary schools, at the other 3 schools aside from Center, we built the modular classroom detached from the space. We couldn't actually attach them. I can't see a scenario where we have detached classrooms at the middle school level, or certainly on the property of Parker as it stands. So that would be a huge cost to replace the modular classrooms themselves, as well as to add the sprinkler system. The bottom talks a little bit about some of the different issues we have at Parker. Another very significant issue, and we'll see a couple pictures of this later, is the building is not ADA accessible. So again, it's grandfathered by code because we're not doing any significant work to it right now. But like one of the key elements of that particular school that we obviously have some concerns with and would like to remedy in a new project is we don't have an elevator that actually goes consistently from all 3 floors, the inside of the building to the 3 floors. So to access the ground floor of Parker, you actually have to take the elevator from the top floor to the middle floor, go outside the building and get on like a lift to be able to go down to the basement floor. Again, met code at the time. We're not doing any significant projects now, so it's not triggering a code, but it's not optimal for learning. So we have students in wheelchairs. If we have staff in a wheelchair, they physically have to leave the building to go out to get in a lift to get to another level. It's really just not conducive to learning. Within the building itself, it's a very interesting kind of architectural design, but a lot of the classrooms are attached, and you actually have to walk through a classroom to get to another classroom, which is just very disruptive educationally when you're trying to teach. So there are all different reasons why Parker was selected. And again, if we don't do something with Parker, there are going to be some pretty significant dollars that are going to have to come into play to bring it up to the type of facility we would want to have our kids in the long term, again, continue to be educated in. This is just a little bit of an example, as I showed you, the second floor, the lower level, and then the first floor. Everything is kind of built around this cube type design. But you can see on the far left where the little stairwell is in the middle, you actually have to kind of walk the stairwell to get to the classes on the lower level or upper level. It's very unique. There's no elevator there to kind of help you on that front. We do have the modular classroom buildings in the back. So you can see where it says unexcavated. The 8 modular classrooms are up on the main level in the back of the school there. And again, if they were to be replaced, they wouldn't be able to be attached to the building. So that would be pretty significant for us. Within the space itself, I didn't do a good job of that. I was supposed to talk you through all the different elements. Let me just flip through this. So here's just a few pictures on the inside I was talking about. So the upper left is kind of a main hallway, just to kind of give you a sense of the scope of the stairs. The third picture in at the top is that lift I was talking about. That's the lift you have to go outside the building to get in, to basically come up to the main or the second floor in the space. The far right is just kind of a shot of what a corridor in the building looks like. And then you have a classroom on the left. You have a little bit of a teaching prep space. You have the CAF and you have the library. What you notice just based on the age of the building is that in the ceilings, it's all concrete. So there's a lot of, kind of reverb. There's a lot of sound in the spaces. Again, just aesthetically, all of the electrical is run either tubing on the inside of the walls. There's no drywall, so nothing is really hidden behind. And you do have rooms because the buildings weren't originally wired for the amount of electricity and power that we need for classrooms these days. So the far right just kind of shows you we have had to add electrical over the years, and it just kind of hangs in the different spaces. The building itself, traditionally, again, very structurally sound. It's concrete, but it is a darker, kind of look. There's not a lot of natural light in the building. You have a gymnasium. The extra phys ed space is actually a beautiful fitness room, but it's in one of the modular classrooms in the back of the space. They weren't able to accomplish that within the building footprint itself. They do have what they call a cafetorium, so it's a shared cafeteria auditorium space, but you have, because of the tightness of this facility, like kids eating lunch on one side of the wall while the music classes are taking place on the other side of the wall. So again, it's just not super conducive to learning and obviously sound. And then in the gymnasium, it has more of like an elementary design to it. Parker does not have an auditorium like this where you could hold the school assembly with the students. So normally you would defer to like your gym space and you would have the bleachers be able to pull out. But again, just because of the size of the space in the school, they have more of like an elementary model for the gym space. So you don't really have enough bleacher capacity to hold the full school or even half school assembly. Let me have one quick sip of water. So this just kind of sums it, where we identified Parker as the school. We said this is the school that we want to submit the application to. We ended up submitting in 23 for the Parker Middle School project, and again, right before the holidays, we got the award notice that we were invited into eligibility. And just as a note, we had the formal projection on enrollment done in 2016 and 21, and currently, we're serving 5,130 students pre-K through 12, and that number is actually slightly higher than either of the projections. So the two projections we've had have actually underestimated the number of students we have. We haven't had a situation where the estimates have been greater. So that just leads me to believe that the projections themselves have been very conservative. These projections are not over-anticipating the number of kids that are going to be coming, because the last two actually slightly underestimated. So when we talk about building size and right sizing, I think that's significant to look at. When we do take a look at our enrollment, again, we use NESDEC, the New England School Development Council, to take a look at our spaces. And so this is historical. These are hard fact numbers based on October 1. This goes back all the way to the 2013-14 school year, all the way to 23-24. And if you go to the far right in that column, the 5130 students is what we just talked about. That's what we're currently enrolling for this year in this school. You'll actually see this is that same number. Let me go back for 1 second. So when you see in the far right, pre-K to 12, 5130, oftentimes when we're working with numbers, both the state, because of funding and things like that, you are actually looking at K to 12, not pre-K to 12. So the second column in says 4930. This is the K to 12 enrollment. So we're just going to take a look at that, not pre-K at this point. So that 4930 you'll see in the far right-hand column. This is consistent all the way back to 13-14. This is your K to 12 enrollment. And you'll see we're actually slightly less than we were in 2013-14 overall. And a lot of people, when they talk to me, they say they almost look at the district being pretty flat enrollment-wise. And I think what you don't see unless you really dig into the levels is, yes, the district is pretty flat, over the 10-year period, but what we're starting to see is that the elementary enrollment is really increasing and the high school enrollment is dropping off. So the number may appear to be flat, but we are definitely seeing that trend of numbers coming into the district. NESDEC then takes their whole enrollment projection. They take a look at live births in town. They have a whole formula that they use. They took a look at the number of students on an average who would transfer into the district, who transfer out of the district. They take this all into consideration, and they have done this enrollment projection for us, and projecting out to the year 33-34 with 5,800 students. But even if you fall back to the K-12 number, the 5,590, a significant increase. The NESDEC will tell you that their forecasts are actually pretty solid 4 to 5 years out, because it's based on live birth data. So we know the kids that actually were born in Chelmsford, very good indicator that they're going to be coming up to the school system. It becomes a little less reliable as you get into the outlier years, 6 through 10, but that's why we have our update done annually, just so we can kind of stay on top of that. But what they're projecting, again, the far left is that 4930 we saw for the current year, increasing all the way up to the 5599, and that's out to the year 33-34. So we really need to be preparing for that increase over the next 10 years. We don't physically have the capacity for that. So again, the school building project is one piece of this. Regardless of the school building project, We don't have capacity in the district for another 600 kids. So that is very significant to us. This, again, shows you all the way back to 13, 14, and heading out to the 33, 34 school year by grade. So this will show you at the bottom of the chart, your elementary and how that's increasing. Those kids obviously each year then factor up to middle school and then up to high school. What I found helpful was actually just to kind of look at these numbers. I took on the far left the base year, and then all the way on the right, kind of your 10-year out. And you can see over that 10-year trend, an increase of 200 elementary school students, 299 middle school students, and 157 high school students to get to your 669 student increase that we're projecting. Now again, when I looked at this particular project, we know the data is very solid for the first 4 or 5 years because again, it's based on the actual births in town. And we also knew if we do this particular school building project, around 2030 is when it potentially could come online. So I took a look at just those 6 years that get us to 2030. And again, over those 6 years, just as a base, we'd be looking at 223 elementary kids additionally. So that's, if they happen to be spread through town, that's an extra 50 kids per elementary school. That's an extra 2 classrooms. Now, they're never going to be at the right grade levels, but still 50 extra bodies in a building is significant. And I'm very concerned also about that middle school increase of over 100 kids, obviously spread between 2 schools, but that's a pretty significant increase, particularly if they're 5, 6 at Parker, because again, we know Parker is over capacity. The high school has capacity to take on the 100 kids. That would not hurt the high school programming or anything like that. My main concern is really that elementary and middle school. So that brings us to where we are today. So in December, MSBA invited us into what they call the eligibility period, which is their first step in the process. It kicks off a 270-day window, which for us begins April 1st. They had to stagger the different districts that got invited into eligibility, and we happened to end up with an April 1st start and a stop right at the end of the calendar year, at the end of December 27th or 28th is when that ends. So that kicks off our 270-day period where we have to do a number of different elements. The next step would be to then get invited into feasibility. And feasibility is a longer process where you kind of get into the nitty-gritty about the building of the project. I'm going to touch on a very high level about that, but right now we're really focused on what's called eligibility. So in eligibility, we obviously received that invitation in December. We have a compliance certification that we have to sign and submit. It needs to be signed by the town, myself, the school committee, to basically indicate, yes, we're interested in partnering with the MSBA, we understand the rules, so that's more of just a compliance document. We have to put together a local school building committee that would actually kind of shepherd this project through. That would be a broad group. There are obviously certain people who have to be on that, kind of by title or role or definition within town. But then you're able to add individuals to that role, to that board. Some are voting members, some are non-voting members. They like you to look in the community to see if there are people who have certain backgrounds, maybe architectural or engineering or school related. There's a whole configuration we have to go through, but we have to put a school building committee together. The school district needs to work on the educational profile. We have to document kind of every square inch of Parker School, how we're currently using it, what the space is being used for, again, to kind of attest that we're using everything in the building that we can. And then we start to shift a little bit to like what we'd actually like to see in the spaces, or what we'd like to see happening in the new building. There's an enrollment projection that we have to do with the MSBA. Again, we'll have our data that we bring to the table to talk about what our current conditions are and even what our longer term projections are for the data. They have their own system that they have us go through, so we'll be doing that with them as well. We have to work very closely with the DPW, because the state obviously wants to know if they're going to fund this project with you and partner with you financially, that you're going to maintain a school that you built. So they want to take a look at maintenance records. They want to see how we maintain our current spaces, what we would do to propose to maintain the new space. I think we'll do very well with this because the town does a very nice job of maintaining spaces, but there's a lot of work DPW will have to do with this as well. We need to then have there be a vote to authorize funding for just the feasibility study at this point in time. So if we get invited into feasibility, that's when we then have to hire an owner's project manager or an OPM, and there's a designer selection process you go through to hire someone to design the building for you. You have to go through your feasibility study, you have to do your schematic designs of your spaces. That's a very involved process, and we need to be able to fund that locally. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's actually just a smaller vote that'll be coming forward to town meeting at the end of April to just fund the feasibility study, not to fund the entire project. And I'll show you the timelines for that in a little bit. But that would be the last step, and the last step that we have to do before the end of the calendar year. If we then get all that accomplished, we submit that to the MSBA. They work behind the scenes with you to put together a kind of a scope document, a project funding agreement for the feasibility study. It would ultimately, we hope, go to the MSBA board meeting in February of 2025 for approval for feasibility, and then you would enter feasibility. So that would be like our next earmark. As much as I think we're very ready for a lot of these different elements, it's not going to take us 9 months to do. This is the channel that we're on, and because we're one of many districts that are in this sequence, we can't just kind of jump the line and go forward, because MSBA also has a certain amount of money and they know when it's going to become available, and so they have sequentially spaced this out. So that's kind of where we're falling in this. This is just, more of like a list of each of those 9 different areas that I talked about having to accomplish over the course of the period. Yes, it ends December 27th, so right at the end of the calendar year. And that's when we hope we would be then invited into feasibility. So for me and for the community and for the town, this is what we have to look forward to in the coming months. First, between April 1st and again December 27th, we need to get through eligibility. We need to do the 8 different steps, provide local votes, provide documentation, set up our school building committee, do our compliance certifications. We have to do all of that paperwork, get that in line. We do have a request on the town meeting warrant at the end of April for $1.8 million, and that would basically fund the feasibility study that would begin in 2025. Again, that funding is used primarily to pay for the costs associated with the OPM, the owner's project manager, and the designer that ultimately gets selected to do the work in the project. In feasibility is when we would really vet out those 3 options, which of the 3 schools we'd like. We have to vet out where would we actually build the school if we build the school. There are a number of different steps that we have to take a look at. The designer and the OPM would be kind of guiding the ship through that. There will be a lot of community participation throughout that whole process. Not only on the school building committee, but we had visioning sessions early on when we were even talking about getting to this point. There would be regular periods for the community to be giving input as to which option they like, which option they don't like. I like this option, but have you considered? So there will be a lot of opportunity for the community to weigh in on this, because this is really bigger than just the schools. This is a huge investment for the town. It's a space that we'd want the whole town to be able to utilize and really be comfortable with. So there would be a lot of work that would go into to that. For us, in case someone asks, you technically don't need to take the feasibility study vote until the end of the process, closer to the fall. However, our town meeting is structured in such a way that typically financial articles take place in the spring at April town meeting, and more zoning type articles take place in the fall. We technically could wait until the fall, but in talking with the town manager and even the MSBA, you can do the vote whenever you want to, and you're better to just align it to one of your actual town meetings instead of having to have like a special town meeting. So that's why we're bringing it forward in April. Now that $1.8 million is apportioned. So the MSBA would be participating with us on that. So they would ultimately be reimbursing 52.26% of that fund. The town does need to bond for the full amount, but they have a pro-pay system that actually reimburses you as you go. So the town would not actually be, you think like a mortgage, they wouldn't be actually financing that over the term. They would just be paying off their piece of it. So half of that, you know what we're gonna do? One sec. Just so that the community actually can hear all the questions and the answers, I have one last slide, and then we have a microphone set up, so we're going to let anyone come and ask questions, but we just want to make sure that they get recorded. We want to hear from you, but we want to make sure that the public does too. I do think that's significant, because sometimes people don't realize that even at this point of the game, the state's partnering, and the state is reimbursing. So we'd be on the hook for about $900,000, and the state would be contributing $900,000. We'd be obviously providing regular updates formally to the boards, so the select board, the FinCom, the Permanent Building Committee. And actually, you didn't mention this, but I see there being a tie-in with the town's Permanent Building Committee, because the town has one. So we'll have to have a discussion about, are there certain reps from the town building committee that maybe get invited on to this building committee? Is there like a liaison type role? I'm not sure exactly how it'll play out, but there will be communication with all the different town committees. School committee, obviously, and then I see it being kind of a standing report at town meeting under the different report outs, just to keep people involved. And again, those are the two important dates that I mentioned. Regardless of how quickly we move through the eligibility period, February 25 is the earliest that the MSBA will consider our application to move us into feasibility. And then feasibility starts, and it's about an 18-month process. So the earliest that the MSBA would actually consider moving us into kind of a project funding agreement and an agreement around the schematic design and what we'd actually be going to the town for is July of 26. So it's more likely for us that it would be like the fall of 26, when potentially there'd need to be a town-wide vote for some type of an override or debt exclusion or something like that pertaining to the project. But that is the absolute soonest it would happen. You obviously have latitude beyond that, depending on like what kind of conditions you get into, how many scenarios you want to look at. We've been pretty tight to say that these are the three options we want to consider, and we've actually done a lot of the legwork ahead of time with the other firm when we were doing our planning. So I think we're actually in a good shape. We already have some senses of like what we'd like to look at spatially to potentially have the new space. So I don't think that's going to be super cumbersome, and I think these are dates we can hit. But I do just want to be clear with everyone. February of 25 is the first possible opportunity to move into feasibility. And then we would not be coming before the full town for a vote to support the project until minimally July of 26, but it's more likely fall of 26 when we actually would come forward. So I know that was a lot of information. I got to go have another sip of water. But what I'd like to do is obviously give everyone time to kind of think about it. Because we are recording this for individuals who couldn't come here tonight. We want to be able to post this to the website and be able to share it with the community. We have a mic set up and a camera just so that we can actually kind of record the questions, and they can record the answers. So I would welcome anyone that has any questions, comments, concerns to go to the mic and just ask their questions, and we'll engage in a little dialogue. The school committee members certainly may want to weigh in, or if someone has questions for anyone, you're welcome. If I can help answer any questions, we certainly will. But love to hear your feedback, love to hear your questions, concerns in this initial phase. Just kind of want to get the information out so everyone has as much as they possibly can as we start to talk about this as a community. So, thank you. Glenn, this is your opportunity.
Yeah, I'm Glenn Thorne, Precinct 7. Very good presentation, Jay. And because there's an upcoming vote, I mean really soon upcoming vote at town meeting, I just wanted to make sure I understood. I think you explained it, but I want to double check. There's a $1.8 million request that's going to go in front of town meeting in one of the warrant articles. And it's likely that we're going to be reimbursed for half of that cost eventually. When does that $1.8 million start to be spent? It sounded like January of 2025, and for how long is that $1.8 million going to be spent? It sounded like for over 18 months until July of 2026, which is $900,000 for Chelmsford and $900,000 for the state, but spread over that amount of time starting in January 2025, as I heard it. Does that sound right?
Yeah, no, you're dead on. So the vote in April would actually be an authorization to borrow, but because we won't be starting the feasibility stage until we're invited in January of '25, that authorization will just sit. The town won't actually bond or request any funds until we're actually invited into feasibility and until the point that we actually contract with the OPM and the designer for the project, which would likely, it certainly will be after '25. So sometime in probably the spring of '25. And then that project has to wrap up by, we're estimating again, July of '26. So over the course of that, year to 14, 15 months is when we'll be expending the funds. The town will expend the $1.8 million, but the half, the 900,000, the 52.26%, will be reimbursed on the go. So when the town receives a reimbursement, they'll pay down that piece of the bond that was issued. So the town would really be longer term financing the 900,000.
So the reimbursement is not something that we have to do something else to get. It's part of the arrangement we have with the state that will happen.
Yeah, it's laid out in what they call the project funding agreement.
Right.
And then you can actually request funds monthly, so you can request a reimbursement each month as you go.
I know this is going to come up in April. I just wanted to make sure I got the
the
amount of money and when it's spent clear.
Yep,
Thank
your
you.
dates were right on. Thank you. Yeah, anyone's welcome, honestly, to come ask questions. And
Hi, Diana LeBeau. I am going to ask two questions that I think I know the answer to, but I have had many other parents, I'm a parent of two kids, I've had many other parents ask me and wanted to, hear some clarity on it. One of those questions is about what's the targeted timeline if all moves forward that this school would actually come online, and where would it physically be located? Those are two questions that I've heard come up really frequently, so I'd love to hear an answer tonight.
sure. So both are not exact answers, right? So if everything went swimmingly and, we were invited into feasibility in February of '25, if we got through feasibility and ultimately had a vote in the fall of '26, you still have to go back and finalize all of your design documents, get your stuff ready to go out and bid or whatnot. You probably, these are ballparks, but you're probably looking at close to a year to kind of have all that completed. You're breaking ground probably sometime in '27. I would think the earliest the school would conceivably open is for the 30-31 school year. However, it potentially could be 31-32. Depending on the time again, it's difficult to sometimes open up schools like mid-year. We'd have to see what the construction schedule is. But if everything went well, I would think conceivably 30-31 is a realistic time frame. If any of those steps get pushed back, that obviously just pushes back the opening. So that's hopefully helps you on that particular question. The second one with regard to location, again, I don't know. So that is going to come up during the feasibility phase. We really do need the OPM and the architect to take a look at all the data and to assess the different locations and figure out where is the best spot for this in town. What I will tell you is that typically you want to try to find a town-owned property to build the school on, because the MSBA will not participate in site acquisition, or if you had to do a private taking of a land or property or something like that, they're not going to participate in that, so that would not be reimbursable. So towns typically look to build it on town property. So and again, we have to vet the whole process out. I can tell you just anecdotally, when we had the visioning sessions over the last couple of years to potentially even look at a new project, the sites that were discussed were, and I don't know the exact names of them, but the field space that's next to Parker Middle School was discussed because that potentially could be the new school. And this often happens where you then knock down the old school and you kind of do a trade-off. So while you're building on the kind of the park or the open space for the school, you then take the old school down, and that then becomes the open space and the parking and the parks and things like that. I've heard that spot. There was also, there was a discussion when we were looking at the high school project up on Graniteville where all the fields are. kind of in the back side of the softball field. There's an older baseball field back there. There was conceivably enough square footage to put a school there. There was also talk about, if you're looking straight on at McCarthy Middle School, out in the back left corner of the property, that was also conceivably enough space to build the school, and again, on town-owned property. I see it being something centrally located because, again, where this school is now serving the entire town for whatever grade configuration ends up being, it would be very nice to just have it be centrally located. But I would think it would be in this cluster of space somewhere, but nothing defined yet. Certainly time for community input. We'd have to vet each of these spaces because there are different costs associated with them. But that's the only thing I can really tell you at this point.
Thank you.
Okay.
The last thing I'll just add is just, I guess, something I would advocate for, which is that as the design is taking shape, presuming we move into this next phase, I'm hearing from a lot of community members interest in having some work as a community to provide input on programming at the middle school level that would go right along with designing a new building to make sure that there's alignment with like a long-term strategy of the ways in which our middle schools, plural I guess,
Right.
line up with the high school experience and beyond, and to make sure that we're providing, if we're going to have a state-of-the-art building, that we're providing state-of-the-art academic and extracurricular programming as well.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, this is really the perfect time to do that, and a lot of communities really do use this as an opportunity to talk about what are you currently providing, what would you like to provide, just to make sure that you're actually building out the spaces so that they're very conducive to the type of programming you want to have, not necessarily just the ones that you do have. So the timing is perfect. I've also been part of kind of going out to look at different schools that are recently built to kind of see and talk to their staff. You know, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you have done differently? So we could definitely put some teams together to have those discussions and even go out and look at some spaces. That'll be a huge piece of the project. That'll
Thank you.
come during feasibility.
Dr. Lang, thank you for your presentation tonight. Very thoughtful and well thought out. Quick question. I'm intrigued by the middle project, the larger project, and I wonder, have you currently, or at this point, have you opened any discussion with MSBA about that? About that larger project? Because I read the statement of interest, and we don't talk a lot about consolidation, and it's really geared towards replacing Parker Middle School. But I think that's a great idea, you know, to maybe go for a little more square footage and do some different things. But
Right.
So I'm intrigued by that because the more square footage for more students that we can provide now, construction is never going to be any less cost than it is today.
Right.
And we have reimbursement today. So,
Right.
you know, going for a larger project is not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but I'm just intrigued if you've actually talked to them about it, or if we do talk to them about it, do we run any risk of alienating them where we presented for replacing Parker Middle School?
No, we don't. So, I mean, the discussions to date have really been around the submission of the SOI that we had to do. We identified these three options as what we'd
did?
like to. Oh,
Okay.
no, we did. It's in the application. And then even in the award letter from MSBA that invited us into this eligibility period, they agreed, and actually they limit the scope to looking at these three options.
Okay.
So, no, we've had discussions with the MSBA group just around us wanting to look into them. You don't really get too much deeper until you get to feasibility.
understand.
But no, they've actually approved us looking specifically at those three. So now you have to, I know you know this, but you have to name a particular school as your priority school in the application. And so we put Parker up as the school that we wanted to make the argument about. So that was approved. So technically, any grade level that touches Parker Middle School is then included in the scope conversation. So Parker would have to come offline. There's no scenario where Parker remains open. At the end of this, Parker does have to come offline. But MSBA has already approved these three options. You know, just a one-for-one replacement of Parker, you know, grade 5, 6 for like a 2-grade level configuration. We could do have a conversation around the bigger 5, 8 that then takes McCarthy offline, And MSBA doesn't really, they're not concerned with what we do with McCarthy after the fact. Again, that's where we need to have the dialogue about maybe that becomes the swing space or the fifth space. And then the last one is, again, that the grade level configuration. I was happy that they at least allowed us to have that conversation, because that touches not only the middle school but the elementary also. And they were good with that. So they actually wanted to have that talk, because they do see the district's issue around the enrollment at the elementary and middle school level being an issue. And I do think they try to work with you as much as they can to have your project scope be as open so that you can get into feasibility and really explore these things. So that was it. I also kind of like the fact that, we size-wise, we have 3 different options to kind of look at, an 8, a 12, or a 1,600 student school. So it's 3 different options. But yes, MSBA has said this is what we're going to look into.
Okay, great. Good job so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Contover, I'd like to know in regards to this building committee, the responsibilities and how many members are there going to be and what their eligibility will be, do you know?
Yeah, so I can speak in general terms again, because we really, until April 1st, we haven't really gotten into the work yet. But the school building committee for this, would be a separate committee than like the town's permanent building committee. Although I definitely see some overlap and some members may be coming on board. There are certain positions that, have to be part of it. So the town manager has to be a member of the board. The school superintendent has to be a member of the group. You then look for other people in town government that hold like specific roles. So your DPW commissioner would be on the group. So there's a number of prescribed positions. Then they leave it up to the community to determine like how many additional community members you'd like to include. And you do have to justify like why you would want certain community members on there based on their backgrounds, what they might bring to the discussion. You also then have to designate, because they don't want it to become an unwieldy group, how many are voting members and how many are more just for informational purposes, but members of the group. So that's all going to start to get worked on April, May, and June.
Are we talking about 20 or 30 people on this committee?
I'm sorry, what?
20 or 30 people on the committee?
No. I'm going to say the building committee would likely be 8 to 14, something like that. It wouldn't be 30 people.
Okay.
Now, the committee would be open to hearing from the public. They may have a public session to get public input, because if they have a decision that's coming forward. But if you had a committee of 20 or 30 people, it would be unwieldy to try to get anything done.
Would it be mandatory for them to meet every month, or how is
No,
this set up?
It's mandatory that they meet at certain times, because there are certain actions that they have to take to stay in the timeline. But early on in the eligibility period, I typically wouldn't expect them to be meeting too much, because the work really begins once you get to feasibility. So the group would probably regularly meet at that. I would think it's more of a 6 weeks to 8 weeks, time when they'd be meeting, every month and a half to 2 months. But it has to be a pretty dedicated group, because there is a lot of information that group is going to be receiving and ultimately need to weigh in on. But I say every month and a half to 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jay. Aaron Cunningham, 67 Bill Ricker Road, Precinct 9 meeting rep. So I saw you showed the numbers tonight. I saw them last night at the school committee in terms of the enrollment, especially the 5-year projections,
Right.
and we're getting pretty tight.
Right.
This is obviously a long-term project and takes time to build. And I believe we'll do the right thing, which is build in the expected capacity at that time and then hopefully some future capacity. But if these numbers keep going where they're going, do you foresee, these projects take a long time, do you foresee another school project coming in the future, even just to building capacity or to start to address some of these aging buildings? Because at that point, some of these buildings could be 80, 90 years old. So I don't want to get out over our skis. We got bigger
Right.
things to do right now, but if we're going to continue to look ahead, where are we looking at potentially after this, and what kind of timeline would you speculate on now?
Well, that's a tough one. So what we'd have to do is, obviously, we're looking right now at like the short term, right? Because we have to manage, even if everything goes well, and this is all approved, and we're opening this new school 2030, 31. You know, we have the next 5 years or so where I showed we're going to have another 200 kids coming into the elementary level. We're going to have to really take a deep dive into the spaces we have. We're going to have to take a look at our class size guidelines and enrollment policies. We're going to have to take a look at exactly where the kids are enrolling. Are they in buildings that already have bubble classes? Is there any extra capacity for bubble classes? Yep. Typically, you look at your, all at the same time, but you would look at your enrollments to see if you're within your desired range. If not, the school committee would have to have a conversation about, you know, if our target is, you know, 20 to 22, but we need to go to 23 to 25, is that acceptable in the short term, knowing a year or two down the line there potentially would be a new school? That would have to be a discussion for the committee to weigh in on. Sometimes you do have to, if it really gets tough, you may have to repurpose spaces within buildings that weren't intended originally to be used as a classroom space. You may have to do that temporarily, again, if it's short term and you know there's a new project coming online. I don't see in the next 5 years us adding additional modular classrooms to buildings. I just think the focus is going to need to be on this particular project, and something like that could potentially almost sidetrack it or kind of take the focus off the primary project. I'd want to look first to just see how can we best manage the current numbers and even that projection over the next 3 to 5 years as this progresses. Obviously, if this ever didn't progress for some reason, there needs to be another plan. There's really not a backup plan that can then wait another 10 years. I think this would be the hope that we would then get to the 2030-31 school year and be able to have the capacity that we need likely for the next 20 or 30 years, which would be good. At that point, as we were in development for this particular project, I would probably want to have a group come in again and work again on kind of a longer term plan now that we knew what was going to be happening, say in 2030, 31. Where do we really see 2050 and beyond happening? Because we are going to have to go back at some point to our older buildings and kind of figure out what the next steps are. But we are trying to, as a first step, do as much as we possibly can with this singular project to, again, kind of help the district set it up for the elementary and the middle school for the near future.
All right, thank you. And that's, I knew that was going to be a detailed answer, but you actually answered the second question, which was these short-term needs potentially coming up, more modulars or something like that. And I think think that's not the anticipation right now, which is.
I wouldn't, I mean, particularly at the elementary school level, the ones that we have, I think are super. Mm-hmm. We don't really have a lot of additional footprint to even put them on. At Center, I know you're familiar with, Center was an issue. We actually could only have 4 modules on that building instead of the 6 that we put in the other, just because physically that site could only take 4. So I know there's just not additional space. We really just have to work and be very creative in the short term around our existing rooms and be hoping and looking for that newer building a couple of years down the line.
Well, I appreciate the information. I definitely look forward for us moving forward on this. I think it's something we need to do as a town, and hopefully everybody gets on board with supporting it. Thanks.
Great.
Sheila Pichette, 26 Shed Lane. Obviously, the planning to this date is incredible. I can't even imagine the planning that you need to do in the future, but thank you for all of this so far. I understand that projects like this want to affect the largest number of the school population and or the extended population in town. So I was wondering if you've given it any thought right now as to how to incorporate the seniors, and have you thought about talking with the age-friendly committees, and how would you sell this to the seniors in town, because they're part of it too and they want to know, how can I benefit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually been invited to a few of the senior activities and even the aging community meetings to kind of hear exactly what's happening and what is, I guess, on the front of importance for a lot of the senior community. I really do feel, and my experience has been through the feasibility study planning, we've gotten very good input in previous projects that I've worked on from all elements of the community. Folks who are even considering coming to town might want to hear a little bit about the project and where we're going with this. obviously the community that's already here invested in the schools. We also have, as you know, folks in town who have had kids who've come through the school system but may not currently, but they would love to still be part of this project to figure out, as you said, how it could benefit them. I think we'd have to engage the community through the feasibility and kind of the visioning sessions that we would have to figure out, are there elements that could be built into the school proper that could benefit the community? There are places that will actually build out within their schools, almost like a community center or community areas where the community can come in. We oftentimes work with obviously more school-aged groups. So if you are having, say, like in a theater situation like this, we not only deal with our K-12 population, but any groups that potentially might come in and want to use the space for rehearsals or rentals and things like that. We try to reach out to that group to figure out, as we're building it or as we're visioning it, are there things that we can incorporate that are then going to be attractive to them? You know, I could see us holding, so it's convenient as well, holding some visioning sessions, maybe at the senior center or at different areas where we could very easily be able to get input from the seniors to figure out, are there elements that they would like to see in the school, so that that could also be considered as part of that plan. I know, I forget who it was, someone mentioned, you know, just kind of actually the visioning for like what we'd like to see the school be in the years to come, and not just kind of build the school to like what we currently have now. Those are the conversations I think that need to happen, and they would happen during the feasibility stage.
Thank you, that sounds fantastic.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Kelly. I came here for a couple of reasons. One, to obviously hear the presentation, which was very well done. Second reason I came here is actually to find out what it would take to become a member of the committee, which you've answered now. And the third reason that I came here is because I am actually the facilities director for the town of Lincoln. We just completed a school. It's a pre-K to 8th grade, fully renovated, net zero school. And so I would like to offer up, you know, a guided tour or something like that, you know, some of the things that you've mentioned. The other thing that we're in the process of doing is we're actually building a community center. And so I've kind of seen a lot of these types of things, and, you know, so if there's any way that I could be of assistance, whether it be able to be on the committee or to partner up with anybody who would like to do a tour or something like that, I'd like to offer that up to the community. So.
No, on that, I mean, I appreciate it. I definitely think as we get a little deeper into the project, we'd want to have some local folks be able to go out and actually tour some of the newer schools that have been built. So that definitely is intriguing. There has really been no process yet to determine exactly who will be on the committee. What I'll just tell you from my previous experience would be when we actually kind of designate the roles that we know we have to fill on the committee, those obviously are more like by title of position, so those would be taken care of. But oftentimes what you'll do is actually then kind of put a call out to the community, you know, and again, I typically send out to all the current K-12 enrollees. The town manager would do a wider broadcast to just town residents, but we would actually put a little bit of a blitz out there talking about how we're putting this committee together. You know, do you have a skill that you might like to bring to the table type thing? I've seen it in some communities work kind of like an open application type process where you put like a letter of interest in, and a group would kind of get together and kind of see, you know, we have a couple of people who have done this before, or who are in this particular field, or, you know, might have an architectural or an engineering or a project management type background, and you would then try to kind of assemble members of the team based on that. There are, you know, to Dean's point, there's no like prescribed numbers that you have to have on the committee, and you do have some latitude to kind of figure out who are your voting members and who are non-voting but are bringing information to the table. So we definitely can have those talks. I would think sometime before the school year ends, we would be putting that out there just to be able to really get the information to current parents before we leave for the summer, because it's just difficult to get a hold of people in the summertime when they switch into vacation mode. And this would need to be done before we get back to school in September. So I'll definitely be communicative on that. Jenny's been helping us also with, like, say, advertisements for this, so we put like a Facebook post. I'll have things in my newsletters to kind of solicit interest for this, and I'll work very closely with Town Manager Cohen just to make sure that he's doing the same on his side, and somehow we're putting a good pool together with a good group, a broad range, a good skill set, who can come to the table and help us. I'll reach out to you, though, because I'm curious to see the school. It's nice to just be able to go to communities that have recently built spaces and see exactly like what's worked for them. And oftentimes you find out, well, we did do this, we thought this was going to happen, but it really didn't happen the way we wanted it to. So that's good too. I have some of those stories from past projects I worked on. So no, it'll be open, and we'll definitely be looking for some input. I've said a lot. Are there committee members that would like to say anything, or? I'm happy to share the mic if you guys would like to say anything. You just have to stand up, though, for the TV.
Maria wants to say something. Do you want to say something? I think one of the questions that we got was really important about if you're a senior in our town, and what is the value of this project to you? Okay, I'm 61. Over the next 10 years, probably my 4 to 5 bedroom home is going to be something that I might not want to be dancing in with my husband and nobody else in the house. Those type of things, the planning that we have to do as we move from one generation to the next, the value that a school and its system brings to a community directly relates to the value of the property that you've got. It is that property that's being taxed and contributing to the base, but it is certainly just as important to keep up the school system and to make sure that we're educating the next people that come into the town. Because one of the things this study we did on the demographics and seeing the students that are going to come in is that millennials are buying property in Chelmsford. They're returning. I see a hand up, that's wonderful. And you do that, I think, in part because you trust and you value the education that you yourself received, and you want your children to continue to have that same value. And I think seniors see this. I'm often asked about what we do on school committee, because they're here for a purpose. They brought up their children, they're seeing their grandchildren grow up, and they understand, I think, in a large part, the value that they're contributing through their tax dollars. And in very large part, that's the importance a school brings to a community. But you did say a lot of it, and I thank you.
Well, on that note, I would just very much like to thank you for coming out tonight. I know it was a lot of information. Jenny actually helped us on the Chelmsford Public Schools website. We created a special page just dedicated to this Parker Middle School building project, and we started to upload the different documents from the MSBA's invitation to eligibility, our enrollment projection that we shared with the school committee the other evening. So we're going to use that kind of as a depository of all the information for this project, so in one fell swoop you can go and look up stuff as we go along. So that will be up there. We're going to have a little video section, so like tonight's video will be posted. I'm going to share that out to the town meeting reps, a link, just so that they can go and watch it if they weren't able to come here tonight, because we do have this article coming up in April, and I want to make sure everyone has some of this information. I know it's a lot to take in too, but I'll put the slideshow up so that everyone can link to that if they'd like to, or if you really just loved hearing me talk and you want to go back and watch the tape again, you'll be able to hit that link and do that. But we're going to try to be as communicative as we can through this process, and really it's a lot of information, but I want to share it with people because it really is exciting work that we're doing. being able to work in a community that honestly supports education as much as Chelmsford does is a blessing. I do love working here, and just the thought of being able to do a school building project with this town, I think would be just phenomenal, for the school system, for the kids who are currently enrolled in the schools, and the generations to come. So it's something I'm really looking forward to. We need the community support, we need community partners, and I never want someone to say that they didn't hear about it or didn't know what we were talking about. If people have follow-up questions, I hope you reach out to me. We'll host different sessions as we go. We may try different formats, whether they're in person or we try like a Zoom-type meeting has worked in the past. So we're going to try a lot of different ways to get information out about this project. Please stay tuned. Please tell friends and family and make sure that they know what we're talking about and what we're contemplating, because these are big decisions that are coming our way, but I truly believe they're going to benefit the town in the long run. So thank you for coming tonight. Again, thank you for TeleMedia and the Chelmsford Public Staff and the school committee for coming to participate and hear about the project and support us as we embark on this journey together. So thank you.